When I pulled into the driveway after 11 grueling days in the ICU, the first thing I saw wasn't my front door. It wasn't the oak trees I'd spent 30 years pruning. And it wasn't my neighbor Doug waving from his driveway like he does every single morning at 8 a.m. The first thing I saw was a blue suitcase with a cracked wheel sitting on the concrete front porch. And sitting right next to it, huddled in her winter coat, was my wife, Sylvia. I'm Herbert Callaway. I'm 64 years old, a retired mechanical engineer from Akron, Ohio. I spent 3 decades designing heavy manufacturing systems, which means I spent my life learning exactly how things are supposed to fit together. I know tolerances, I know stress points, and I know when a structure is about to collapse. Looking at my wife sitting on a cold step in early March, I knew the foundation of my family hadn't just cracked, it had been intentionally demolished. Welcome back to Revenge Justice. You know why you're here. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to act with a shred of basic human decency. They just chose wrong. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entitlement, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I read every single one, and it helps the channel more than you know. A triple bypass has a funny way of clarifying your vision. When Dr. O'Malley, a woman with the bedside manner of a stone-cold assassin and the steady hands of a surgeon god, told me they were going to saw my chest open to bypass 3 clogged arteries, I didn't think about my 401k. I didn't think about my pension. I thought about my house. I bought that house in 1991. It's a classic Midwestern colonial on a quiet cul-de-sac. It's the kind of neighborhood where people still respect property lines and keep their lawns immaculate. Sylvia and I built a life there, 4 bedrooms, a backyard garden she spent 20 years perfecting, and a master suite with a bay window that caught the morning light at exactly the right angle. That room was her sanctuary. It held the quilt her grandmother made in the hills of Appalachia and a little ceramic lamp with a blue shade she found at an antique fair in Vermont in 2009. She used to say that room was the one place in the world that was entirely hers. Then there's our son, Lance. Lance is 38. He and his wife, Priya, had been living in a cramped, overpriced rental in downtown Cleveland for 3 years. They are professional consultants, a job title that, in my experience, translates to having very expensive tastes, very little savings, and a mountain of student debt they refuse to acknowledge. They've always operated under the working theory that the world owes them a luxury upgrade just for existing. I tried to ignore the gap between what they expected and what they were willing to work for. I wasn't always successful. In February, I had a cardiac event serious enough to land me in the Cleveland Clinic for 11 days. I was a prisoner of tubes and monitors. The man in the bed next to me watched nature documentaries at full volume at 2 a.m., and I thought that was the height of my misery. I was wrong. While I was recovering, Sylvia was there every day, every single day. She brought me decent coffee from the shop around the corner, because hospital coffee tastes like burnt disappointment. She told me about Doug's new snowblower and how the crocuses were starting to peek through the dirt. She held my hand while I shuffled down the linoleum hallways, moving with the speed of a glacier. By day 9, I noticed her silence. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was the silence of exhaustion. The kind of tired that sleep can't fix. I asked her if everything was okay at the house. She looked at the floor, patted my hand, and said, "Just focus on getting strong, Herb. Everything is being handled." I should have known. Then, handled is a dangerous word. When the hospital finally discharged me on a Thursday afternoon, the Ohio winter was clinging to the ground in dirty, stubborn gray patches. I was moving slowly, the kind of slow where you have to think about every breath and every step. Sylvia helped me out of the car, but she stopped at the bottom of the front path. That's when I saw it, the blue suitcase. I looked at the luggage. Then I looked at my wife standing beside me, and I realized with a sickening jolt that the Sylvia who had been at the hospital every day was a Sylvia who had nowhere else to go. "Lance and Priya moved into the master bedroom for days after your surgery," she told me quietly, her breath misting in the cold air. "They told me they needed the space to supervise the property while you were incapacitated. They moved my things out in stages, first to the guest room, then to the hallway. Then Lance told me there just wasn't room for me in the house anymore. He told me I should find somewhere else to stay temporarily, so I wouldn't be a distraction to your recovery." Temporarily. My wife of 38 years was kicked out of her own bed by her son. While her husband was having his chest cracked open, she had been sleeping on her sister's couch and coming to the hospital every morning, just so I wouldn't have to worry about the blood pressure of a family argument. I stood there on my own front path, clutching the door frame for support, and I didn't say a single word. My father always told me that when you're truly angry, Your mouth should stay shut until your mind has finished building the trap. I helped Sylvia pick up her suitcase. We walked inside. The house smelled like expensive takeout and essential oils. I found Lance in the kitchen, using the Italian espresso machine I'd bought Sylvia for her last birthday. Priya was sitting at the breakfast bar, typing away on a MacBook that probably cost more than my first car. They looked up, surprised. Not guilty surprised. Dad, you're home early, Lance said, not even bothering to put down his latte. We've really optimized the layout of the place while you were gone. It's much more functional now. I looked at them. I looked at the mess in the sink. I looked at the way they had made themselves comfortable in a home they didn't pay a cent for. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. Lance actually looked relieved. He genuinely thought that was the end of it. He thought I was a broken old man who didn't have the heart literally for a fight. That evening, once the house was quiet, I didn't call the police. I didn't call a moving company. I called Gerald Marsh. Gerald has been my best friend since we were kids in Little League. He's a retired electrician who views the world in terms of grounded and short-circuited. He knows exactly how much voltage it takes to fry a system. I told him everything: the suitcase, the temporary exile of my wife, the espresso machine. There was a silence on the other end of the line that lasted exactly 5 seconds. Herbert. Gerald finally said, "Are you going to burn the place down? Because I have the accelerant if you need it." "No," I replied, staring out at the dark backyard. "I'm an engineer, Gerald. I'm going to dismantle them piece by piece." "Good," he said. "Quiet is always worse. Call Margaret." Margaret Shue is my attorney. She's the kind of person who speaks in complete, devastating sentences and never uses two words when one will do. She's handled my affairs for 20 years, and she has the predatory instincts of a hawk. I called her the next morning at 8:45 a.m. from the backyard, making sure the kids couldn't hear me through the kitchen window. I watched Sylvia out there, trying to fix a trellis that Lance had knocked over with his mountain bike. Margaret listened without interruption. When I finished, she asked one question: "Is the deed solely in your name, or is it joined with Sylvia?" "Solely mine," I said. "Inherited the land from my father and built the house before the wedding." "Then this is not complicated," Margaret said. Her voice was like a cold scalpel. "Legally, they are guests who have overstayed their welcome. They have no lease, no equity, and no standing. I will have a formal notice to vacate drafted and served by noon. And Herbert, we are updating your estate documents this week. Every last cent goes into a protected trust for Sylvia. Lance and Priya get nothing, not the house, not the pension, not even the dishwasher they don't know how to load." The notice was served that afternoon by a process server named Phil. Phil was a wide, unbothered man who wore a windbreaker and looked like he'd served papers to cartels. Without blinking, he handed the envelope to Lance right as he was coming back from a hot yoga session. Lance came into my room 10 minutes later, his face the color of spoiled milk. He was waving the paper like a flag. "Dad, what the hell is this? A legal notice? We're family. We were just trying to help. We were going to look into assisted living options for you and Mom so you wouldn't have to deal with the stairs." I sat up in bed, the surgical staples in my chest pulling tight. "Assisted living? In the house I paid off in 2010? We thought it was the best move for your long-term wellness," he shouted. I looked him dead in the eye. "You put your mother's suitcase on the porch, Lance. There is no wellness in that. You have 72 hours to get your things out of my bedroom and out of my house." Priya tried to intervene 20 minutes later. She sat on the edge of my bed and used her consultant voice, the one designed to make you feel like you're the unreasonable one. "Herbert, I think there's been a massive communication breakdown. We thought Sylvia wanted to stay with her sister to get some space. We were just trying to keep the house warm and occupied. She was at the hospital every day," I said. "Every single day. If you had visited more than once, you would have seen her there. If you had called her once, you would have known." The silence that followed was heavy. She realized the misunderstanding defense wasn't going to work on a man who had just had his heart restarted. By Saturday morning, the U-Haul was in the driveway. They took everything they had moved in the espresso machine, the ergonomic chairs, the expensive rugs. They left behind a master bedroom that looked hollowed out. Sylvia stood in the doorway for a long time. She didn't say a word. She just went to the hallway, picked up her grandmother's quilt, and spread it back over our bed. She plugged in her blue lamp and turned it on. "The light is better now," she said softly. "It's your light, Sylvia." I said, "It's your house." The following Wednesday, I sat in Margaret's office and signed the new will. It was the most satisfying thing I'd done since retiring. Lance and Priya were removed entirely. I added a clause that if they attempted to contest the will, the entire estate would be donated to the Cleveland Clinic's cardiac wing in Dr. O'Malley's name. Margaret shook my hand. Well handled, Herbert. Engineering at its finest, Lance. Tried to call 3 weeks later. He wanted to grab lunch and clear the air. I'm not ready to talk yet, Lance. I told him I'm still in recovery, and frankly, I've realized that some things are beyond repair. But Dad, I'll call you when I'm ready, I said, and I hung up. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in a decade. Yesterday, Gerald came over. Sylvia made her famous chicken noodle soup, and Gerald brought a loaf of sourdough from the bakery downtown. We sat at the kitchen table, watching the sunset hit the oaks in the backyard. I watched Sylvia moving through her kitchen, the kitchen she built in the house she earned. She looked at peace. She looked home. Gerald caught my eye and raised his spoon in a silent toast. I raised mine back. My heart might be held together by wires and grafts, but it's stronger than it's ever been. If you made it to the end of the story, you know that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet man with a good lawyer and a very long memory. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel. I'm Herbert Callaway. Take care of your spouses. Watch out for entitled children and never ever let someone move your suitcase to the porch. I'll see you in the next one.